morning, everyone. What a fascinating word habit is. Can you just play with me here? When you remove the first letter from the word habit, what remains? A bit remains. What happens when you remove the second letter? Bit remains. And what happens when you remove the third one? It remains. That's how the habits are. It sticks. If it's a useful habit or a not so useful habit. If it's a useful habit, your life is almost like a smooth ride on the highway. But my engagement with you today is all about how can you recognize your not so useful habits and go beyond them. Now, you might have a question. Why do I need to look at my not so useful habit? To answer that question, I'm inviting you all to my life to see how it was in the last 1.5 years. My first not so useful habit. This was with my wife. Any last minute request to get vegetables or the grocery items, my response was, not that I would say it so loud to invite trouble, but that kind of irritated me. I felt like the vegetable in that cooker, right? My second not so useful habit was with my daughter. I teach maths to her, and whenever we sit together, either she's tired, she's hungry, or she's sleepy. When none of these are at play, she doesn't understand what I teach her. Therefore, instead of we both crunching numbers, she was crunching my patience. I had nightmares with numbers. My third not so useful habit was on the infamous Bangalore roads. Whenever a motorist cut my lane, I had the kindest of words for them. You know what I mean, right? It blew my top. Now, if you look at all these three not so useful habits, it drained my energy. It disturbed my peace. My productivity went for a toss. Now, why do you have to listen for the next 18 minutes or so is, if you can recognize your automatic reactions in your life, right? Your peace, your productivity, your energy is on an elevated level. But for me, I was irritated. I was confused. Confused like whom? Confused like the Arjuna from the Mahabharata. Arjuna is confused because he's asking Krishna, why is Karna called Danshur? Why is he called generous? Why is he called magnanimous? Why is he called charitable? Even I do charity work. Why don't people call me that? Krishna, willing to experiment, says, hey Arjuna, can you look at those two mountains there? He says, I will convert them into heaps of gold coins. And you make an announcement and start distributing to the villages. Arjuna is all kicked about it. He's ready. What he does is he shovels to put it into the gunny bag, or he digs his hand and gives it to every villager who's lined up. It was a backbreaking exercise. He wants to give it up halfway through, but this ego wouldn't let him. But at the end of day 2, he goes to Krishna and says, Krishna, you know what? This is not my cup of tea. I would just want to give it up. And Krishna says, fair enough. But can we ask Karna to do the same exercise? He says, we can. Arjuna in his mind says, this shouldn't have happened. What just happened shouldn't have happened. And this is exactly what I told myself in September 2012. This should not have happened. Festival weekend, I was watching back-to-back movies. Something inevitable happened. I threw up. Nothing new. There was a bout of giddiness. Absolutely nothing new. But the giddiness continued for more than 20 minutes. That was something new. What was happening is, I had to take the support of the wall to go to the bathroom again. The feeling that I had lost my sense of balance. The whole world was spinning around me. Any movement of my head was exaggerated in my, any movement of my face was exaggerated in my head. My sister rushed me to the hospital. The first sigh of relief came in, said there's no internal bleeding, nothing to worry about it. And since it was a festival weekend, the doctors came and said, you have a vertigo. I didn't know what vertigo meant. And doctor said, this is a self-limiting condition. It usually vanishes on itself, but it might also be caused because of the stress. That hit me like a hard bullet. I knew I was under stress. Now, if you look at Arjuna from the Mahabharata, and if you look at Ravindra from 2012, they have a model of thinking. This is called as, model of thinking is black and white thinking. It means that you think in binary. It's 0 or 1, this way or that way, my way or the highway, right? The first technique or the first way you think in the black and white model is it's good or bad. You label things good or bad. And this reminds me of a story from Japan, a poor farmer who has a horse. The horse runs away. And the neighbors come to him and say, what a bad luck. And the farmer says, maybe, maybe not. After a couple of days, this horse, which is run away, comes back with 5 wild horses. The same neighbors come to him and say, what good luck. And the farmer says, maybe, maybe not. The son of the farmer starts training these wild horses. And he falls from one of the horses and breaks his leg. And you know what happens next? The ritual continues. He says, what bad luck. He says, maybe, maybe not. And the soldiers of that kingdom come and pick all the able adults for a war. But the farmer's son is left behind because he's broken his leg. Same thing continues. The farmer says, maybe, maybe not. And how many times we have seen this playing in our real lives? Traffic. Bad, huh? My doctor calls me to rerun the blood test. Very bad. My in-laws are coming and staying with me. Very, very bad. Therefore, the first kind of thinking is good or bad. The next kind of thinking under black and white thinking is should and shouldn't. This is a Japanese monk story. Most of you might have heard about Tanzan and Aikido. There's this beautiful lady wanting to cross the river, but she wouldn't cross because the currents are very, very strong. Tanzan, the senior monk, volunteers, is it okay, ma'am, if I carry you on my back and make you cross the river? She agrees. She's left on the bank. Both of them go back to the monastery. The junior monk, Aikido, asks Tanzan, Tanzan, what have you done? Monks are not supposed to be touching a woman. And Tanzan says, Aikido, you know what? I left the woman back there in the bank in the afternoon. Why are you still carrying her? And just like that, we have voices, we have opinions, right? Which is borrowed from our parents, borrowed from society, borrowed from culture. And in my life, the way it panned out was my wife should have planned to get vegetables. That motorist shouldn't cut my lane. Very bad. My daughter should understand whatever I teach her. Now, if you really look at it, when I say should, when I say good, bad, I'm blaming others. When you think in the binary model, what you're doing is you're avoiding responsibility. That's the reward you get when you think in the binary system. But what's the cost of it? It comes at the cost of your peace, comes at the cost of energy, your well-being, love, all that is lost. But what's the solution? Solution is something called as great thinking. Great thinking has basically 3 steps. The first one is spot it. Now you all know we might be thinking binary, right? 0, 1, good or bad, right and wrong. Now since you all know, it's 50% of the battle won. But to deepen this awareness, what you can do is, can you get your attention back to your breath? They usually say that the difference between being of no awareness and awareness is just the breath. The moment you focus on your breath, you create a gap between your trigger and your response. Now, whenever somebody cuts my lane on the road, I have a smile on my face. And if you see I'm giggling on the road, you know there are comedies of errors happening on the road. Right? This is just the awareness part of it. The next step, the first one is the spot it. The next step is step back and watch. I had a coach of mine who said, close your eyes. And in your mind's eye, can you look at you teaching your daughter? What can you see? And you know what I saw? This was a slap on my face. And I had a colleague of mine in one of my jobs said, you have a face which can get away with a murder. And this was a root shock for me. Something dissipated right then, right? And I had more love for my daughter since then, right? The third step, what is the first step? First one is spot it. Next one is step back and watch it. Next one is flip it. I am reminded about this famous management anecdote where a shoe manufacturer sends 2 salespeople to Africa to look at what the potential of the market is. The first sales manager calls the boss, says, boss, bad news. Nobody wears the shoe here. And the second manager calls, says, good news, nobody wears the shoe here. It's just the lensing and the framing that you have which can make a lot of difference. Therefore, with my wife, we go out together to buy vegetables, we go buy groceries, movies. There's a lot of ways that we show love to each other. I had to just flip it. Instead of feeling the pressure, I had a lot of pressure. It's that easy to change the habit. Right? (2012), vertigo, right? It took almost 20 days for me to recover. I had to relearn walking. But the best thing that happened around this episode is I attended a seminar. And in the seminar, the leader is saying this. He's saying, imagine you wore a blue glass and you go out to do your work. Now, your thoughts, your feelings, your actions are consistent with your view of the world. And you might have even forgotten that you're wearing the blue glass. Just like that, you might have a belief, you might have a thought, you might have a story, a narrative which you're not even aware of, but your actions are consistent with that. That was the eureka moment for me. It was a bolt from the blue. You know what popped up in front of me? I am not smart enough. How does a person who is not smart enough behave? He takes extra works from colleagues. He wants to prove a point by working hard. Why does he want to prove a point? Because he's not smart enough. He wants acknowledgement. He wants validation. Even if he gets, he's not satisfied. because he's not smart enough. The moment I realized that, I put down my papers. Why did I put down my papers? Because if I had applied it earlier, I wouldn't have gotten a job because I'm not smart enough. And I remember this conversation exclusively with my wife. And I said, you know what, wifey? This is the proudest moment of my life. This is the first time I'm standing up for myself. And she holds my hand and she says, you know what, Ravi? You've always been enough. And you are enough. Coming back to Mahabharata. Now Karna is invited. Karna, even before the villagers could line up to take the gold coins, he calls a couple of villagers, and you know what he says? This is yours. Please take it away. And he walks off. Arjuna is taken aback. Hare, just what happened here? He wants Krishna to unpack this for him. Krishna says, there's nothing much here, Arjuna. You know what? Karna is selfless. Whatever his action was, it was very effortless. Because his intentions were pure, unlike you who had a hidden agenda. And Arjuna says, oh, okay. Then what you're saying is, it doesn't matter what you do, but the spirit behind it is very important. Krishna says, exactly. Karna might have a kavach around him, which is the diamond kavach, right? But you have a diamond in you. Allow it to shine through your actions. Krishna continues. What you do definitely matters. But what matters more is how you do it. And if you're looking at any of your not so useful habit, look at the word habit. Flip it. This is an Arabic term called thiba, which loosely translates to being kind to yourself. Right? Allow yourself the grace of being kind. It's easy to change your habit. Thank you for your listening. Thank you so much.